The Biophilic Leadership Summit is the only multi-day conference entirely dedicated to biophilic projects, principles, and research, bringing together the top industry leaders in an intimate, natural setting to network, build partnerships, and learn from each other.
This year's summit will explore biophilic placemaking and how we can use biophilic principles to promote health, happiness, and vitality in public spaces.
In addition to fascinating presentations, delicious farm-to-table meals at Serenbe, and cocktails, this year's summit will feature a selection of biophilic experiences like forest bathing, bird watching, and more.
So join us in Serenbe for the 6th Annual Biophilic Leadership Summit from March 24th to March 26th, 2024.
Learn more about the summit and register today at biophilic.summit.com.
That's biophilic.summit.com. We hope to see you there.
Hi, I'm Monica Olson.
And I'm Jennifer Walsh.
And you're listening to the Biophilic Solutions Podcast, where every other week we sit down with experts and thought leaders across industries in order to explore the innate connection between humans and nature and why we need nature to thrive.
We truly believe that in order to tackle the global environmental problems we're facing, we as humans must reconnect to the natural world and come to a better understanding of how we fit in and how we are so interconnected. So in every episode, we'll interview new guests that help us uncover and highlight nature-based solutions to get us on a path to greater health, tackling climate change, and ultimately getting outside and connecting with nature.
So let's get to today's episode. Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, Monica.
Jennifer, if I were to tell you that there's a global commercial flooring business that produces net zero carbon emissions and is working its way towards net negative emissions, what would you say?
Okay, well, I've already met our guest today, but pretending that I know nothing, I would say that sounds incredible, but I'd be doubtful if it's possible. I mean, carpeting and flooring, particularly when we're talking large-scale production for commercial spaces, seems like it would be a really environmentally taxing industry. But I have a feeling you're about to prove me wrong.
Haha, you are correct about that. So today we're talking with Kari Pei, who's the Vice President of Product Design for Interface Flooring, which I mentioned is a global flooring company specializing in carbon neutral carpet tile and resilient flooring. And they make the carpet tiles that many of you may know as Floor, F-L-O-R. So Interface is widely recognized as a global leader in sustainability and biophilic design. And their founder, Racy Anderson, was a true visionary who really recognized the importance of cutting carbon emissions in the early 90s. And he set ambitious goals for his business to achieve what is now net zero emissions.
Both Kari and Interface had been on our radar for quite a while. Actually, Kari lives in Serenbe and is Monica's neighbor. And I had a chance to interview Kari during a pre-pandemic Walk with Walsh video. And Kari is so knowledgeable about biophilia and so thoughtful about the way she incorporates nature into her work.
We're really excited to share this conversation with you all. Talk about Interface's groundbreaking efforts to really become a net negative company and what that means, as well as the importance of sound and ambient noise in the built environment and why the world really does need a new industrial revolution.
Absolutely. So let's get to our interview with Kari Pei.
We're so happy to have you. And I'm so happy to be in Serenbe with our producer, Katrina, and Kari Pei, and Monica. And we're all together to record this wonderful conversation with you and to find out everything you've been up to, because your work is incredible. So I guess what we always like to start with, so how did you get to where you are today at Interface, and what are you doing right now?
Okay, well, how I got to Interface, it was via plane. But after spending my career in New York with Maharam, with Gordon, having my own studio, clients were Starwood, and I worked with Marriott, all the big hotel groups. And it was a call that I received that I thought was someone asking me for recommendations of people to hire. And I said, because I wasn't looking for a job. I was really, really happy where I was. I had such a fantastic career working for these great houses and working with terrific people, brilliant minds in the commercial interior industry. But they said, no, we're not asking for recommendations. We want you. Oh. Well, but you're in Georgia and I'm in New York. So that was wild to think about. But my husband said, Interface is a culmination of your entire career, because most all of the companies that I had worked with had started thinking about sustainability and started embracing it. And when I was working with Wolf Gordon, I really tried to move it forward so that it was at the forefront of their thought process. But when it doesn't come from the top, it's always a little bit of an uphill battle. But with Interface, sustainability was from the top. Ray Anderson told the company, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to change. And we're going to lead the world in that change. And so it was something that I could not turn down just because of the opportunity to work with such minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, we absolutely feel like Interface is almost like a little bit of a family, just the relationship with Steve Niger and Ray, and how he inspired Steve to really create Serenbe.
Yeah.
So when you took...
I wish I had been, out fly on the wall.
Yeah, I know.
Having those conversations. Yes. Because to take it from the idea of a manufacturing facility to an entire living community and a way of life, and to sow those seeds and to turn it into something that we have right now, which is a model community for the whole world.
Yeah.
And it is being modeled after. It's so inspiring.
Yeah.
It really is. It's amazing. So once you heard it's in Georgia and now I'm coming to Georgia, were you ready to come full time, or did you do it as sort of a consulting back and forth from New York to Atlanta?
No, they courted me from October to April. So that was a bit of a long period before I decided to sign with them. And then once I did, it was head first.
Yeah.
And, naturally, Serenbe would be the only place to live.
Right. And we've done so many things here, but I think you kind of stumbled upon it that you could actually live here instead of the city or LaGrange, which is where Interface is. The fact that worked out was pretty miraculous.
I was going to live in Atlanta. But they were putting me up at the inn during this courtship. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going anywhere else.
I'm staying right here.
I had the best of both worlds.
Sure.
The best of New York and the best of the South.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's really great. So tell us about the role that you took and what you're doing now, because you're doing global design for the whole company. And so just give us a little quick snippet of what that's like.
It was funny because at the beginning, I don't think the way that Interface came about is that I think it was maybe the board of directors had said 25 years of your product design has been with an outside consultant. So we need to establish an inside design capability, product design. And so with that, I was tasked with building the first in-house design studio for Interface. And they just started me designing products for hospitality. And because at that time, it was a market segment that they really wanted to grow and approach designing for hospitality from a customs capability, which they hadn't done before. Before they were selling their commercial products to hospitality. Instead, so I brought in a new yarn system and we developed a whole new level of product design that would help the hotels differentiate their brands within our products. So for a 3-star hotel, they could put in a typical commercial product that's gorgeous. And then for the 4 or 5-star brands, then they could up the game with this new yarn system.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So, and then that time I was I think my title was product designer, but then it quickly turned into commercial products and vice president of Americas. And now, vice president of global design.
So cool. And you're all over the place presenting, right? All the time.
Yeah. That is the most fun out of my job, is meeting all these people that come from different walks of life, different industries, meeting with people that are building initiatives for corporate responsibility, as well as people that are building products, textile designers, as well as architects and interior designers, all kinds of creative minds, which, for a while it felt like our country was putting less stock in creativity and the revenue producing
mass production
power that it has.
Yeah. And
now I think it's turned around. I think that creative minds now have a seat at the table in a lot of places. Not enough, but still a lot more than it used to be.
That's nice to hear, and especially in the kind of work that you're doing. So when you're developing and creating these carpets and these fabrics and these designs, was there always that play with nature or like biophilic design or biophilic elements even when you started, or did that kind of happen as a understanding?
Well, my first collection was inspired by Central Park.
Oh,
Did I know that? Did we not have this conversation before? Wow.
I mean, it just comes naturally.
Sure.
To look to nature for inspiration. And that can come in not just by trying to create images or like literal references to nature, but I think it comes from trying to figure out what it is about nature that is so compelling and what it is that we connect to on a psychological level, an emotional level. And you try to bring in those emotions that it elicits into the product design. In happiness, intrigue, coziness, warmth, security. You know, I think that the product has to have emotion. I think the color has to have emotion. I don't think that the color should just be so flat. I think that it has to be nuanced, just like nature's nuance. You know, there's nothing that you look at in nature that is a flat color.
So true.
Yeah, so you have to craft the color the same way as you have to craft the texture and craft the weight even of a product has a lot to do with how we feel about it as well.
The touch.
Yeah.
When you were coming in, they already had the carpet tiles going and they had already had the floor line. And that's a little more of the, would we say that's more of the residential side? Although that has a contract, right? That has a contract side.
The contract has just really been taking off this last couple of years.
And so did you, when you started working with Interface and then the Biophilia, like some of the carpet tiles are fascinating to me because you put them together, and these are basically squares that are carpeting, but they all kind of match up, even though they don't
have the same pattern.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. And that was that a fun project to work on? Or
no, and that's again how we can mimic nature. Because instead of making the same pattern repeat across the floor, it's in imitating the way that a floor looks, like when we're walking in the woods, the floor has leaves over here and dirt over there and some rocks over there, but there's a continuity to it. And the color changes, the texture changes, the density changes, the image changes, but there's still some continuity to it. You know, and I think that when we're in spaces where you can have that level of casual placement, it makes us feel more comfortable. It makes us feel like we're in nature. It's a subconscious feeling. Like, because if it's so modular and so the gridded or the repeat is so regular, if something's off, like by half an inch, it will bother us.
It's incredible.
You know, I'm a little OCD, so it will definitely bother you. I will figure out a way how to line it up before I go, because I can't walk out of the room with that off.
It's interesting, though. You're right. It kind of triggers us in a way that we weren't expecting, or because, like you just said, nature's so nuanced in a way that's never the same pattern over and over again. It's always this ebb and flow that's beautiful, but never that set pattern.
I find it very exciting. And before I came to Interface, my work was, you know, with upholstery and wall covering primarily. And I always used as much of the machine as I possibly could.
What does that mean when you say as much as the machine?
Like with a loom, you can have 56 inches wide. With wall covering, you can have 54 inches wide. And from side to side, if you're doing rotogravure printing, your limitation is the size of the cylinder because it has to match up. But I would use that whole cylinder to create a design instead of a repeat. I would create it so that from side to side, from 54 inches across 54 inches, it'll match up if it has to, so that the seams disappear. You want the seams to disappear so that you're not sitting there in the room figuring out why they didn't measure it correctly. But this has always been, I guess, something that has been with me. I don't even know where it started. I think I think it started when I was in college even.
What'd you study?
Oh, I went to University of Michigan to study engineering and ended up in art via architecture. Sitting there going, I don't think I want to be an engineer. Maybe I want to be an architect. Oh, I have to have a portfolio. I've never taken an art class before.
Yeah.
I'm going to take some art. Oh, okay, well, forget architecture. I'm falling in love with this. That was the route I took. My father was not happy. He wasn't. He said, I'm not going to pay for you to ruin your life. Yeah. So I quit Michigan, lived in Ann Arbor for 9 months, got residency, re-enrolled, and paid for school myself.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, it was that important.
Determined,
to me. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
That's incredible.
Create. Yeah.
What was your first job out of school?
Oh, this man came to my BFA show and saw my work and hired me at my BFA show to do murals. My BFA show had these huge murals that were landscapes, basically, that you can walk in and out of.
Oh, wow.
And there were, I think, 7 panels that enabled people to walk through these landscapes that I had silk screened. And I'm a nut. I'm a total nut.
Love it.
And so he hired me to design these murals for his store on Michigan and Oak in Chicago. It was called Matthew C. Hoffman.
Okay.
It was a custom jewelry design store.
Wow.
So I did that. Then he hired me to do his ad campaigns in Interview magazine.
Oh, wow.
And that was so much fun because we created this sort of docudrama with this mermaid that came up on shore and then this goddess, Adonis kind of guy, finds her and she's got all these jewels on.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it was Interview
magazine.
Yeah. Totally go crazy.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. It was
How
like fun days. Yeah. And then I moved to New York, and my first job in New York was weaving for Susan Horton, who became my maid of honor in my wedding.
Wow.
She had this design studio weaving beautiful mufflers for men.
Oh, wow.
Like out of like these Italian boucle yarns, gorgeous yarns. And then she's like, okay, well, we can design another product, so let's do something else. And we built a silk screen studio in the back and started marbling silk. And then I started doing designs and exposing the screens and printing the fabric. And we made those into ties, neckwear.
Oh, my
for
gosh.
Men. So it's a little bit of a Ralph Lauren story there.
Yeah.
And then Jane Barnes saw what I was doing with the neckwear, so she hired me to come and be her neckwear designer. And then I became head of studio at Jane Barnes.
Wow.
And at Jane Barnes, we were designing fabric for Knoll.
Oh, okay.
And then Maharam was looking. And at Jane's, Jane was so advanced, and she was so wonderful to me, too. And she sent me to Japan to teach the Japanese mills how to use these French weaving programs.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so there I was, like all by myself, this 25, 26-year-old in Japan, traveling around the country, teaching French weaving programs to these little Japanese weavers.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so we were very advanced in software, using interfacing software with the looms.
Okay.
And the mills were buying the same looms that Jane was designing. Jane was working actually with the software developers for the looms in helping them design the software and work out the kinks. So I became very adept with software very early on when no one else was doing it. Maharam was looking for somebody with that skill. So jumped over at Maharam, and then I became their head upholstery designer. And then people at Wolf Gordon were looking for somebody that had the skill sets that I developed there. So everywhere I went, I worked with fantastic people. All the people I worked with are still my friends. You know, I'm still friends with Jane, so appreciative to the responsibility that she gave me at such a young age. And Mary Murphy, who was my boss at Maharam, is still one of my dearest, closest friends. And then Wolf Gordon, the vice president of marketing at Wolf Gordon, is one of my best friends to this day. I made a video for her birthday the other day, pretending that she was still driving around in my car. I pasted her picture.
Oh, cute.
The passenger seat, as if we were still having the same conversation that we had for 10 years when we worked together at Wolf Gordon. it was fun.
And did you come across biophilia and biophilic design before Interface, or did you sort of intuitively know about it before it was a term?
Well, definitely before Interface, because when I was at Wolf Gordon, that's two answers. I think it was always intuitive. My family had a florist when I was a little girl. The florist was huge. It was just rows and rows and rows of flowers that we would play in. And forest engineering, water conservation, floristry, those are all my family's businesses. You know, my brother is a scientist, and it's just very much in our blood. So when I started designing, I think nature was always sort of in my language. But then when I started working for Wolf Gordon, I said I wanted them to... They were a vinyl company, vinyl wall covering. They didn't have any idea about sustainability or sustainable materials. And so I said, I'll come work for you if you dedicate a good portion of your product line to being non-vinyl, non-PVC. And then when I said that, I also wanted to know what exactly is it that's so bad about vinyl. But when I did my research, I found actually it kind of got a bad rap. But because it got that bad rap, that industry had merged so far away from its origins and was manufacturing much more sustainably. They started getting rid of their phthalates. They started making products that you didn't have to worry about off gases, airborne particles, and things like that. I mean, it came a long way from the time that Greenpeace first started calling out the PVC industry to where it was, you know, by the time that I left. And in that, in the 10 years that I was at Wolf Gordon, immediately started manufacturing products that were biodegradable and going to all the environmental design conferences, looking at all kinds of alternatives to some of the substances that were being used, helping our manufacturers, because Wolf Gordon didn't manufacture anything. Everything was manufactured outside, and helping our manufacturers get there to phthalate-free materials. And when I left Wolf Gordon and started my own design firm, those were some of the principles in which we were designing. And then when Interface called, it was a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. You guys have some products now that actually absorb carbon.
Embodied carbon.
Because for any listener that's listening, you know, carpet is one of the roughest, you know, how do you get rid of the oil? And it's like, you kind of can't sometimes unless it's 100% natural. But the backing, like there's so much detail in a carpet industry. But Ray's journey to make it stackless and circular and factory as forest, all these really interesting things. Will you share a little bit about some of those initiatives that they're working on? Especially I'm fascinated with the tiles that,
So Ray started Climbing Mountain Sustainability, which did include factories as a forest and changing the way that everything was manufactured, as well as building factories that when you take up land and you're displacing life forms, then you build your thing and then you replace those displaced life forms. You know, you give them another habitat. So that's kind of factories as a forest, an aspect of it. But then also, as we were manufacturing, we were looking at our materials, we were looking at our emissions, we were looking at the water, we were looking at all the components that go into making manufacturing and measuring those. We changed everything so that we could reach carbon neutral. We achieved our goals, and those are always fluctuating too, because as your raw goods, your supply chain changes, maintaining that status changes with those changes. So it's a constant being carbon neutral. You don't become carbon neutral and you're carbon neutral forever.
No.
It's an ongoing process. Then taking that the next step further. The next step further is carbon negative.
Right.
So when we start off with something that's carbon neutral, it means that all the emissions are already measured and accounted for in being zero net carbon, that the manufacturing of the products and the amount of carbon that the product contains are at a 0 point. So making that carbon negative means that we're going to take it a step further and use bio-based materials for that backing.
Mm-hmm.
And those bio-based materials are going to have embodied carbon already. And so the amount of carbon that is already contained in the product is less than the amount of carbon that it takes to manufacture the product.
Wow.
So it becomes carbon negative. And, our manufacturers the manufacturers for our yarn, that supplier, has been a fantastic partner in this with us. And when Aquafil and Interface really started becoming partners was about, I've been there 7 years, and maybe it was like 6 years, like 13 years ago, I think, is when they first started NetFX. And that's when they started developing these programs with local fishermen in like, I think Maldives and in Indian Ocean. I'm not sure exactly. I know I'm supposed to know these things. West Africa. And they started, these local fishermen were collecting discarded industrial fishing nets by the tons and getting paid by our yarn supplier at market prices for that nylon.
Amazing.
So if you think of all those surfaces, if their manufacturing was carbon negative, wow, what an impact that would have on our Earth.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I have goosebumps just thinking about it right now.
But I think it's such a great future to think about. I mean, we talk about optimism so much and hope that some people get bogged down in the fear factor. And so how do we storytell and give people a vision of a future like that? And we can do it. A lot of the things exist. We have to find it, and then commitment and pushing as consumers, corporations.
And it's just like, it gives you hope for the future and the future generations in this world. If we can clean up the world, clean up the atmosphere, reduce the carbon emissions, reduce the greenhouse gases, then there is a future for the future generations. And then we just get rid of war. Then we have a really good plan.
Yeah. We'll start with carbon.
Start with carbon.
Which could get rid of war, possibly, if we get rid of the carbon.
We can affect that right now. And the sooner the better. I mean, really, the sooner the better.
I have a question, because I know we talked about this before. I'm going to go in a little different direction, because you taught me a lot about sound. When we had our Walk with Walsh in 2019, when you started speaking about the impact of sound that I never really thought about before. Can you tell us a little bit more about sound in your work interface, like what you're creating to really, and what happens to us when we are affected by certain sounds?
Yeah, well, this gives the importance of flooring products and the materials that you choose to put in your floors, but not just the floors, it's the materials that you choose to put on your walls and the furniture and the ceiling. Acoustics are hugely important to our well-being and our everyday well-being. Just the amount of time that our brain has to spend every single day filtering out all the noise that it doesn't need to listen to is exhausting. And it's no reason we're so tired by 6 o'clock and you drive home from work and you're falling asleep at the wheel, because our brains are just exhausted by all the ambient noise. The sound of the elevator dinging, the sound of the people chattering in the coffee room, the sound of pencils scratching, if it's a place that has absolutely no insulation.
Or we talked about like at houses.
Glass, steel.
Or your compressor outside your window in your HVAC system.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. Like, we have all of these standards that measure how well our buildings are, but they don't measure the amount of noise that is in the outside that's prevented from coming to the inside. Or they don't even measure the amount of noise that's in the inside that prevents somebody from being able to focus. And the amount of time that it takes once you're distracted from whatever activity that you're doing that you need to focus on and work and be productive in that activity. Once you're distracted from that, the amount of time that it takes to get back to your focus is really significant during the course of the day. It really does impact focus, productivity, cognitive connectivity, so many things that make us not just better performers in our work environment, but just make us healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that,
it's profound. It really, because it's so neat when you think about all these little things that I've started changing in my own habits because of learning from you.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing at home? How am I filling my home with better acoustics?
Yes, better acoustics, but also sound too, and the quality of the sound that you're filling your space with. So we have these things that we can't control, but the things that we can control are really influential. I think Mount Sinai is doing this study. They got millions of dollars a couple years ago to do this study on the impact of the fetus from the environment that the mother is in, and measuring sound and the stressors that sounds create to a fetus has an impact. And so if you just think about that, if a baby's stressed out because of jackhammers or whatever that's outside the window, or the mother being stressed out because she can't focus, then that's going to affect the child. And then it kind of spirals from there. So we have to think about a healthy environment beyond just indoor air quality. We have to think about it in terms of lighting, in terms of sound absorption, in terms of the textiles and the textures that we introduce to it also.
Is that epigenetics then, what you're referring to?
Yeah, so epigenetic programming is exactly what you're bringing up, is directly related to creating the neural connections that are formed by the environments that we start encountering from the moment that we're born, which is why Mount Sinai is studying it for in utero. The sounds, the lighting, the touch, everything, the first things that we have in life, our brains start making these connections to, and it carries with us throughout our lives. I like to tell a story about how when I was a little girl, so I'm one of six, and we're all like a year and a half apart. And so it's a very crowded house. And my poor mother, I can't imagine how she survived. Really,
She's a saint.
Yeah. I mean, she should be in a mental home. and no disrespect for people that are in mental homes that are fully functioning people, but my mom is amazingly functioning. Wow. So, the house was so crazy. Our friends used to call it the loud family. So I used to escape all my siblings by climbing into a closet and climbing on top of the hangers and then on top of the shelves and reaching up and pushing through this little door that led to our attic. And I would hide up there to get away from the noise. The chaos. It was my space. And I would go up there with a flashlight and read and just get away. And so when I came here to Serenbe and I bought a house, I realized later, after I chose my house, that I chose it because it had an upstairs room that was part of an attic that was exposed to the living room. The builder decided to close it off and make it like a functioning room. And that was my attic. Wow. I spend most of my time up in that space. I love that room. I'm so calm up there. And that is the same thing. That is epigenetic programming.
Yeah.
Wow. We all have our spaces, but then we also all have things that we're repelled by too. And we can't understand why we're repelled by them. It could be a place that it subconsciously reminded you of when you had a bad experience when you're younger. So that is epigenetic programming as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, and some of that you're sort of touching on with the thinking of the sound and the light and the textures goes into those 14 patterns that we've talked a lot about. Obviously, you know all about with Bill Browning and others.
Terrapin Institute.
Who we love and recommend everybody to go dig up Terrapin. We'll put it in our show notes. They're amazing. But you know that
they have the 14 patterns of biophilic design, which they identified brilliantly across time, across cultures, across geography, that is just a very succinct identifier of the kind of places that, or the kind of elements that we should be incorporating into our places of work or living. And did you know that they just added a 15th pattern?
Yes.
We do.
We love this, but talk about it.
It's our favorite one.
Yeah. What is it? We can all say it.
Say it, ready?
1, 2, 3.
So silly.
I love that they added
Incredible.
I know, because it's not
Makes so much
something that you
sense.
can identify in any other way other than those 3 letters. And we all know exactly what they're talking about too. Like when you walk into a space and you're just in awe, you don't understand why you're in awe of that space, why it makes you feel that way. And that reminds me of so I'm going to do a little name dropping here. My father-in-law is Kari Pei, and I've been to the majority of his projects around the world, and so awesome. It's so beautiful are these spaces, and it really encompasses awe, because when I sit in these spaces and I just watch the people traversing them, I watch the light moving across the space, creating different shadows. The buildings are very much alive, even when they're empty.
Yeah.
And that is the awe to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a talent.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think Bill had taught me, or through a conversation with him, is that, when you have an experience like that, you are feeling smaller and understanding the largeness of the world, and you sort of understand your place a little bit better. I think of like when I saw an eclipse, like that was probably one of the more profound moments of my life.
That'll do it too.
And you also have this feeling of empathy. And so they've done studies where people, after having an awe experience, they actually have more empathy and they're sort of better
Makes so much
people
sense.
and community members, and which I think is fascinating. And I think going out in nature, so much of nature can give you that experience. You don't have to go to, Yellowstone and see.
Yeah. No, it could be as small as watching a little bug on a leaf.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
so glad you said that too, because you're right. So many people think we have to go far and wide, but we don't. You just kind of look for things and you're going to find the beauty of awe right in front of you if you're open to it.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Changes you.
People just have to stop sometimes.
Yes.
Just stop.
So glad you're saying that.
And breathe.
Yeah.
And feel the magic of the moment just by being able to stop and breathe and touch your nose and close your eyes and do all the functioning things that you take for granted.
Right.
But I think that's one of the beautiful things about nature too. And like making a point to go out and connect to nature, it makes you feel more human. I think in the power and the beauty of being human.
Kari, that's a beautiful way to end.
I think so.
But I do want to ask if there's anything else you want to share with us, any projects or anything that we should
How can we help support you?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have some new materials that we're looking at, and I can't say anything about
Okay,
this.
very exciting.
No.
But you'll let us know first, right?
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things I think that
break
is
the news.
really, really interesting, looking at the future, it's not something that we're doing right now, but I feel like it's around the corner from being more accessible, and we might start seeing more of this happening. But when I go to these trade shows, like the last trade show, Dutch Design Week, as well as Milan Furniture Fair, I'm going again after 2 years of not being able to do this. I cannot wait. My head is splitting. But one of the things that impacted me the most was this idea of, well, you know how, I'm going to go back a little bit here. You know how we all started like kind of growing our own vegetables, especially during 2020, we were making our own food. We were sharing our food. We were giving it to our friends, family, neighbors, community. And not everybody, but a lot of us had this opportunity to do this.
Huge spike in vegetable gardening. Huge spike during the COVID.
So I wonder if we took that idea and not just made it about edibles, but we started harvesting in an aquarium in our house or in our backyard, wherever it may be, algae. and you start harvesting your own algae. And you take that algae and you can extrude it into a bioplastic. You take that bioplastic and you can feed it into your 3D printer, and you can start manufacturing your own objects.
You're blowing my mind right now.
That would be so incredible. Yeah.
Yes, super interesting.
Oh, I need another chair. Can you throw some algae in the printer?
Right. Well, I was thinking like I've lost a missing Lego piece for my child, and I need that one particular piece.
Yes.
That'd be a small
and that would take you no time at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, but then, you can do it for small objects, but then what about the bigger objects like furniture or bedding or even rooms? We can start creating businesses that have larger scale 3D printers that you can go and say, hey, here's my bucket of algae. Can you go and make a bed for me? But this is all
possible.
Yeah.
That hope, right?
It's the hope. Yeah. And so, but we think about it as like being kind of out there and woo in the future is like such a sci-fi kind of idea. It's not that at all. And that's why I brought up the gardening, because the gardening very much returned us to how we used to eat. We used to grow our own food before all the industrial agriculture came along.
Yeah.
We used to share the food that we grew with our neighbors.
Yeah.
And we got away from that because of the age of modernism. But this is a way of returning to that core, is that we used to make our own tools. We used to make our own clothes. We used to make knit our own sweaters. And so this is another way of us taking back the human.
I like that a lot, taking back the human.
In our everyday lives.
It's beautiful. It's like hyper-localization, and we're just going to be closer to our community and eat and grow and be a part of where we live, where we survive and thrive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thriving.
Yes.
Hope and thriving.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kari.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
So great. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. We always love to see you.
Oh, well, I love seeing you guys and finding out what you guys are up to, too. And I love listening and following you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
so much fun.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Jennifer, Kari is so great and so fascinating. I absolutely adore talking with her.
I know. I love talking to Kari because she's so creative and brings such an artistic sensibility to her work. Her passion for biophilia and biophilic design is so evident when you speak to her. She's just so passionate about it.
I totally agree. And, I'm always inspired by Interface as a company, but Kari's like on a whole nother level. I think that when they started working towards the net zero carbon emissions in the 90s, that was a pretty remarkable feat. Nobody was really talking about it, or very few. And they really achieved that goal in 2019. But instead of just sort of sitting on their laurels, they're now working, becoming carbon negative. Such a model for other companies to look up to and follow.
Absolutely. When there's a will, there's definitely a way. And Interface shows us that the possible to manufacture on a global scale without harming the planet. It may not be easy, but it's definitely doable.
Right. And every aspect of their production process is so thoughtful, from concept to design to sourcing the materials. It's all done with nature and well-being and sustainability in mind. And I was fascinated with the fisherman story.
I was also fascinated by epigenetic programming. We also haven't talked much about the importance of sound in the environment. Both are concepts I'd love to dive into further.
Me too. And I love that these are things that Kari thinks about in her approach to design work. So the look of the flooring is really inspired by nature, but she's also thinking about how the material will affect sound in the space, or how it sounds as well as feels under your feet. So all these things, when we try to mimic nature in the built environment, change the way we experience spaces and contribute to our well-being.
Absolutely. It's so cool. All right, Monica, I guess I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye, Jennifer.
Bye, Monica.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we would love for you to follow us on your favorite podcast app, give us a 5-star rating, and please leave us a review.
It really goes such a long way towards helping us reach a wider audience and sharing these amazing interviews and solutions with the world.
Absolutely. So thanks so much for following and reviewing the podcast, and we'll be back with another amazing interview in 2 weeks. You're now a part of the Biophilic movement.